What actually happens inside the human body? After one full year without alcohol, most people expect the obvious improvements: better sleep, more energy, clearer thinking, and those do happen. But 1 year is completely different. At this point, the body isn't adjusting anymore. It is fully reorganized around the absence of alcohol, and what that reveals about human biology is something most people never consider. Understanding what the body does over 12 months exposes a hidden truth about how deeply alcohol shapes biology and what the body is actually capable of when that signal is removed for good. To understand why 1 year matters, there's something important to understand first. Most people think of alcohol as something the body simply processes and moves on from, but that's not what's happening. Alcohol is a repeated biological signal. Every time it enters the body, it triggers a chain of responses. It enhances GABA, the brain's calming system, while disrupting glutamate balance. It disrupts the brain's dopamine system, the reward pathway responsible for motivation and pleasure. It interferes with how the liver manages fuel. It raises cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone, and it creates low-level inflammation throughout multiple organ systems simultaneously. None of this is dramatic on a single occasion, but repeated over time, the body doesn't just process alcohol and reset. It adapts to it. The nervous system adjusts. The liver reprioritizes. Sleep architecture reshapes itself around the disruption. The body essentially learns to function with alcohol present, which means it also has to unlearn that over time. That adaptation is the key to understanding why recovery isn't measured in days, it's measured in months, and why 1 year represents something genuinely different from 1 week or even 1 month. So what is the brain actually doing at the 12-month mark? Because the early changes are well known. But what happens after the brain has had a full year to rebuild? In the first weeks without alcohol, the brain is in a recalibration phase. GABA and glutamate are finding a new balance. The dopamine system, which alcohol had been artificially stimulating, is slowly recovering its natural sensitivity. This is the phase where many people report mood instability, cravings, and difficulty feeling pleasure. The brain is compensating for the absence of a signal it had adapted to. By 3 to 6 months, that recalibration is largely stabilized for most people. Anxiety levels lower, mood becomes more consistent, focus improves. But at 1 year, something more significant has occurred. The dopamine pathways have had time to recover more fully. Research on alcohol and reward circuitry suggests that dopamine receptor density, which decreases with repeated alcohol exposure, begins restoring over extended abstinence. The stress response system, which alcohol chronically dysregulates, has normalized. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for decision-making and impulse control, shows measurable functional improvement in studies tracking long-term abstinence. The brain is no longer compensating for the absence of alcohol. It's regulating itself independently, stably, and without chemical assistance. That shift from compensation to independence is the neurological difference between early recovery and 1 year. Sleep is one of the first things people notice improving, but the sleep changes at 1 year are different from the early improvements. And the reason why reveals something important about how deeply alcohol disrupts recovery biology. Alcohol has a complicated relationship with sleep. It helps people fall asleep faster, which creates the illusion that it aids rest. But it severely disrupts sleep architecture. It suppresses REM sleep, the stage critical for memory consolidation, emotional processing, and cognitive restoration. It fragments sleep in the second half of the night as the body metabolizes it, and it reduces the amount of deep, slow-wave sleep, which is when the body does most of its physical repair. When alcohol is removed, the brain goes through what researchers call REM rebound, an increase in REM sleep as the brain tries to compensate for months or years of suppression. This can cause vivid dreams and disrupted nights early in recovery. By 3 to 6 months, sleep cycles stabilize, but it's not until around the 12-month mark that sleep becomes fully optimized. The cycles run completely and predictably. Deep sleep normalizes. REM completes naturally without rebound distortion. The body is no longer catching up on missed recovery each night. It's completing full, efficient recovery cycles on a consistent basis. And because sleep is the foundation of almost every other biological process, immune function, hormone regulation, cellular repair, cognitive performance, optimized sleep at 1 year has downstream effects on the entire body. The improvements compound. But the brain and sleep aren't the only systems changing. Now consider what's happening at the metabolic level. Because the liver is doing something most people don't realize, and understanding it changes the picture of what 1 year actually means. When alcohol is present in the body, the liver treats it as a priority. It drops everything else and metabolizes alcohol first. This is because alcohol, unlike fat or carbohydrates, cannot be stored, so the liver processes it immediately. The result is that fat metabolism slows significantly while alcohol is being cleared. Over time, this contributes to fat accumulation in the liver itself, a condition called alcoholic fatty liver disease, as well as disrupted blood sugar regulation and increased insulin resistance. Cortisol, which alcohol elevates, also promotes fat storage and interferes with how cells respond to insulin. In early recovery, these systems begin stabilizing. Liver enzyme levels, which elevate in response to alcohol-induced damage, typically normalize within weeks to months for most people without severe damage. Fat metabolism resumes normal function. Blood sugar regulation improves. But at 1 year, these systems aren't just functional, they're consistent. Energy is steady throughout the day because blood glucose is stable. Fat metabolism operates efficiently because the liver is no longer in chronic detox mode. The liver, freed from constant alcohol processing, has fully returned to its other essential roles: managing hormones, filtering metabolic waste, synthesizing proteins, and regulating the body's internal chemical balance. The system isn't recovering anymore. It's running clean, doing the work it's designed to do, without the constant disruption of alcohol competing for priority. There's one more layer to the 1 year timeline that only becomes clear when looking at the body through the lens of long-term health, and it may be the most important change of all. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the most well-studied mechanisms behind aging, disease, and cognitive decline. It's not the acute inflammation that comes from an injury. It's a persistent, low-level activation of the immune system that gradually damages tissues, accelerates cellular aging, and increases risk for cardiovascular disease, neurodegeneration, and metabolic disorders. Alcohol promotes this kind of inflammation through multiple pathways. It increases intestinal permeability, sometimes called leaky gut, which allows bacterial byproducts to enter the bloodstream and trigger immune responses. It activates inflammatory signaling in the liver. It promotes oxidative stress, which damages cells at the molecular level. Research consistently shows that even moderate, regular alcohol consumption elevates inflammatory markers like C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. At 1 year without alcohol, that inflammatory burden has had significant time to reduce. The gut lining has had time to repair. The liver's inflammatory load has dropped. Oxidative stress has decreased. And because the immune system is no longer operating under this chronic low-level stress, cellular repair becomes more efficient. Recovery from physical stress improves. Cardiovascular risk markers shift in a healthier direction. The body's cellular aging process, which inflammation accelerates, begins to slow its pace. This is where the effects of 1 year without alcohol move beyond how someone feels day to day. They start to affect how the body ages at the cellular level. That's not a short-term outcome. That's a long-term biological recalibration. After 1 full year without alcohol, sleep is consistent and complete. Brain chemistry is stable and self-regulating. Metabolism is efficient and steady. The liver is operating without disruption. And chronic inflammation, one of the hidden drivers of aging and disease, has had meaningful time to decrease. But the most significant change isn't any single system. It's the pattern. The body is no longer adapting to a repeated chemical signal. It's no longer compensating for disruption. Every system is operating on its own terms. Because in human biology, the body responds to what it is repeatedly given. Remove the signal long enough, and the system doesn't just recover, it resets.